Welcome to the Red Dice Diaries. This podcast is a rambling journey through the wonderful world of RPGs from the viewpoint of a long-time GM and player. The music at the start of this podcast was Nightmare by Alexander Nakarada and is used under Creative Commons license. Okay, so welcome to this episode of the podcast. Apologies if the sound isn't quite as good as usual. I'm recording this on my laptop using an old Samsung Go mic of mine, but we'll see how we get on. Okay, so recently I've been thinking a fair bit about maps and how I use them in games. And this was spurred on partly by Colin from the Spike Pits podcast, where he was talking about cartography and technical drawings. Really enjoyed that episode. Now, I use a fair few maps in my games. I'm a big fan of Roll20, so I've used various random map generators because I'm all right when it comes to the map drawing side of it, but I'm certainly no Dyson or anyone like that. I'd classify myself as interested amateur at the best. But one thing I have noticed is that aside from the dungeon maps, the maps of like cities and towns, etc., while they're really nice, and especially because I use the Midlands setting for my regular campaign, which has excellent cartography in it. Glyn does an amazing job with that, and he's just been nominated for an Emmy, so let's hope he gets that. But I found that I don't tend to use them an awful lot, besides just sort of showing very vaguely the relative position of the players if they're in like a city. Currently, my players are exploring the large city of Plymouth, and literally we've moved the tokens around in Roll20 a couple of times just to show their relative position, like from the edge of the town to the central market to the docks. And the actual map of Plymouth I created using a random generator that I found on the internet, and it looks nice, it's pretty, but doesn't really add a great deal directly to the game. So I've been trying to think about ways that I could simplify this map making process while still having that feeling of exploration in the game. So one of my thoughts was to use like a zone map, which is something that is used a lot in Fate, and that's effectively you just pick out sort of separate areas, or I suppose districts in a city or a town, as individual entities, and you map them out very roughly and their rough positions to each other, and people move between zones. Normally one zone a turn, but they can make a roll, typically in Fate, to move more than one zone. And that works absolutely fine. I've used it in Fate a lot of times. I then moved on to creating a more sort of flowchart based alternative to a zone map, which I've just actually shared on Google Plus in the Punched Muculus Tavern G Plus group, which is all for the Midlands. If you're interested in the Midlands, I advise you to check that out. But I'm still sort of struggling with that sort of intermediate area between a map that looks cool, because obviously I do want a map that looks cool. Let's face it, we all like cool stuff in our games, and one that also has some level of simple functionality. And I think that's what I'm after in all of my OSR games, a sort of elegant simplicity that allows me to do a few bits and pieces to give the impression of exploring a city or a town, whilst actually it not getting in the way, and mainly just sort of focusing on the actual interesting bits of the game, the dungeon crawling, the encounters, the NPC dealing, etc. And I've also been inspired in this by the guidelines in the Vornheim City book for Lamentations of the Flame Princess, that has some excellent recommendations for creating city districts, etc. So I'm going to give those a try and see how that works out. So anyway, if you've got any suggestions as to how you create cities in your game, or how you balance that sort of divide between looking good and being functional, drop me a line or a voicemail at the podcast. Details of how to do that coming shortly. So thanks for listening to me ramble. Take care, enjoy yourself whatever you're playing, and I'll catch you soon. So that's it for this episode. If you have any questions or suggestions for things you'd like to see in the podcast in future, please either email them to reddicediaries@gmail.com or drop me a voicemail at Anchor. Until I see you next time, wherever you're playing, take care and enjoy yourselves.